The World Cup starts in few days, and I've been thinking less about the football and more about the numbers behind it. Because this specific event, this tournament happening right now across the United States, Canada, and Mexico, is one of the largest transfers of money in the history of sports. Not a transfer between clubs, between FIFA, governments, corporations, broadcasters, and billions of fans who are about to spend money they might not have fully budgeted for. I want to look at those numbers today, not to be cynical about the spectacle is real, but the money behind it is also real, and a lot of it tells you something interesting about how value works, how demand creates price, and how a single sporting event becomes a $13 billion business. And at the end, I'll tell you who I think wins. Not financial advice, just a dad who thinks about money and watches football. Let's start with the number that gets the most attention, the prize money. FIFA is distributing $655 million in prize money among the 48 teams, with an additional $72 million in preparation costs, bringing the total distribution to $727 million. To put that in context, in the 2022 Qatar World Cup, the total prize pool was $440 million. The prize money alone this year, $655 million, is a 50% increase. The full total, including preparation costs, is $727 million. And the breakdown tells an interesting story about how the tournament is structured financially. The champion takes home $50 million. That's $8 million more than Argentina earned $42 million after winning in Qatar. One team, one title, $50 million. The runner-up gets $33 million. Third place, $29 million. Fourth place, $27 million. After that, the amounts drop more significantly. Teams finishing 5th through 8th receive $19 million each. 9th through 16th, $15 million. Teams that make it out of the group stage but no further, 17th through 32nd, get $11 million. And the teams that go home after the group stage? The ones who qualified, showed up, played 3 games, and didn't advance? They still take home $9 million. Plus an additional $1.5 million in preparation costs that every team receives regardless of performance. So the minimum guaranteed payment for every team at this World Cup, prize money plus preparation costs, is $10.5 million. Some sources now cite $11.5 million after FIFA increased preparation fees to $2.5 million per team in May 2026. I want to pause on that number for a moment. $10.5 million, guaranteed, for showing up. This is the floor, not the ceiling. And for smaller footballing nations, countries where the entire national sporting budget for a year might be a fraction of this, that $10.5 million can genuinely reshape infrastructure, youth development, coaching, facilities. It's one of the arguments FIFA makes about the expansion to 48 teams. More teams means more nations participating in this financial distribution. Whether that argument holds up under scrutiny is a different conversation, but the numbers are real. Now, where does the $655 million in prize money, $727 million total, actually come from? The prize pool is a small fraction of FIFA's total revenue from this tournament. FIFA is projected to generate approximately $9 billion in revenue from the 2026 World Cup alone. For the full 4-year cycle between 2023 and 2026, the total reaches $13 billion. Double what FIFA earned in the previous cycle. The expanded $871 million grand total distribution, including $355 million to clubs through the Club Benefits Program, comes out of that revenue. Broadcasting rights account for roughly $3.9 billion of that. FIFA has struck deals covering more than 175 territories. The broadcast rights to this specific event are one of the most valuable sports media assets in the world. Marketing and sponsorship add several billion more. The major commercial partners, the corporations whose logos appear everywhere around this tournament, are paying for access to an audience that no other sporting event can match. And then there's ticketing. This is where the numbers get genuinely strange. FIFA received over 500 million ticket requests for this tournament. 500 million requests for approximately 7.1 million available tickets. That's a demand-to-supply ratio of roughly 70-1. Let that land for a moment. For every ticket that exists, approximately 70 people wanted it. In that environment, FIFA introduced something that has generated significant controversy: dynamic pricing. The same system airlines use. The same system concert promoters use. The price changes based on demand. Here's what that looks like in practice. The cheapest tickets, the ones FIFA celebrated as proof of accessibility, started at $60 for certain group stage matches. FIFA noted that roughly half of each federation's allocation fell within the most affordable range, $60, the price of a casual dinner out. But $60 is not what most people paid. A Category 2 ticket for a group stage match between smaller nations in Philadelphia was selling for $380. A Category 1 seat for the United States versus Paraguay at the Los Angeles Stadium was listed at $4,105. For the final at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey on July 19th, base prices for Category 1 seats reached $6,730. And on FIFA's official resale platform, one final ticket was listed at $11.5 million. I want to be clear, that's a listing price, not necessarily a sale price. But the fact that someone listed a ticket to a football match at $11.5 million and did so through FIFA's own authorized platform tells you something about what this event represents to certain people. I want to sit with the dynamic pricing thing for a moment, because I think it's genuinely worth understanding. Dynamic pricing is not a new concept. Airlines have used it for decades. Concert promoters use it. Hotels use it. The price of the same room or seat changes based on when you book and how many other people want it at the same moment. What's new is applying it to a World Cup. And the reason FIFA did it is straightforward. They left money on the table in Qatar. Tickets that sold for $220 in the official system were reselling on secondary markets for $2,000 or $3,000. The gap between official price and market price was going to ticket brokers and scalpers rather than to FIFA. Dynamic pricing captures that gap. The price adjusts in real time toward what people are actually willing to pay. The problem, and this is real, not just optics, is that it prices out a significant portion of the sport's most devoted fans. Football has historically been working class and global in a way that other major sports haven't. The culture of the World Cup is partly built on the fact that people from everywhere, with very different financial means, have been able to attend. At $380 for a group stage seat, the starting point for many matches in major venues, that accessibility is substantially reduced. Even Donald Trump, a billionaire ally of FIFA President Infantino, said publicly he wouldn't pay the ticket prices. That's a specific data point about where prices landed relative to what people considered reasonable. Meanwhile, demand continues to vastly outstrip supply. With weeks to go before the opening match, thousands of tickets remain unsold, not because demand collapsed, but because at certain prices, even a tournament with 500 million applications can have unsold inventory. This is the paradox of premium pricing in mass events. You can charge more and generate more revenue, while simultaneously leaving seats empty. Both things are true at the same time. This is the fundamental economics of dynamic pricing applied to a global sporting event. The price discovery process is real, and the results are uncomfortable for a lot of fans who followed the sport their whole lives, but can't afford to attend. What FIFA has essentially created here is a two-tier World Cup economy. A small number of people experiencing it in person, mostly from higher income demographics, corporates, and ultra-motivated fans who saved or sacrificed for it, and billions of people watching through screens, on broadcast television, on streaming, on phones, in bars and living rooms, and wherever the signal reaches. Both groups are generating revenue. The in-person group through tickets, hospitality, and local spending. The remote group through broadcasting rights that advertisers pay billions to access. The tournament works financially with either group. What it's no longer designed to optimize for is affordability for ordinary fans who just want to be there. The financial impact extends far beyond ticket revenue. FIFA forecasts over 5.5 million in-stadium attendees, a record that surpasses even the 3.1 million who attended Brazil 2014. The World Trade Organization estimates the tournament will produce $80.1 billion in gross economic output. $30.5 billion of that flows into the US economy. Hotels, transport, food, hospitality. Everything that moves when 5 million people travel for football. The stadium capacity here is larger than Qatar. The average venue holds over 60,000 people compared to Qatar's average of 47,000. And North America's spending culture means every match day generates economic activity that was structurally impossible in smaller venues. Let me put the viewership numbers in context, because I think they're the most staggering figures attached to this event. 1.5 billion people watched the Argentina-France final in Qatar in 2022. One match. 1.5 billion viewers. To be specific, the estimated total viewership over the full 2022 tournament was around 5 billion engagements across TV, streaming, and digital platforms. The final alone drew the 1.5 billion. FIFA's projection for 2026, they expect to surpass all of those numbers. The expanded format, the North American time zones that make matches more accessible to audiences across the Americas, and the rising global consumption of football through streaming. All of this is expected to push viewership to unprecedented levels. For comparison, the Super Bowl, America's most watched single sporting event, typically draws around 120 to 130 million US viewers. The World Cup final draws more than 10 times that globally. This viewership scale is why the broadcasting rights are worth $3.9 billion. It's why global corporations pay hundreds of millions to appear on hoardings around these pitches. There is no other advertising medium with a comparable audience. There's something worth saying here about what these numbers mean beyond money. The World Cup is genuinely one of the very few things that a significant portion of humanity watches simultaneously. Not as a political event, not as a news story, as something most people experience as pure spectacle. Sport in its most amplified form. The 2022 final, Argentina against France, was one of the greatest football matches ever played. Extra time, penalties, a Mbappe hat-trick against the best player in history in his likely final World Cup. It was, by most accounts, a legitimately extraordinary piece of sport, and 1.5 billion people watched it. For context, 1.5 billion people is roughly the combined population of the United States, Europe, and Brazil. Watching the same 90-plus minutes of football in real time, in hundreds of languages, across every time zone. There is no product launch, no movie release, no album drop, no political event that generates comparable, simultaneous global attention. The closest thing is perhaps a major election, and elections divide people in ways that football, at least in these peak moments, doesn't. For broadcasters who paid billions for the rights, this scale justifies every dollar. A guaranteed audience of that size, across that demographic range, across that geographic spread, you cannot buy that anywhere else. For FIFA, the viewership scale justifies the sponsorship pricing. When global brands pay $100 million or more to appear around this tournament, they're paying for access to this specific audience at this specific scale of attention. The economics of broadcasting rights and sponsorship only work because the viewership is real and verified. The audience is not aspirational, it's measured. I'm not particularly sentimental about this. I approach most things through the lens of economics and psychology rather than emotion. But even from that lens, the scale of shared human attention that this tournament generates is remarkable. And attention, in the modern economy, is the most valuable resource there is. When something can reliably capture 5 billion units of human attention, it becomes one of the most commercially valuable objects on the planet. That's what the World Cup is. Not just a football tournament. A machine for generating shared attention at a scale nothing else reliably achieves. I want to connect this to what we usually talk about on this channel, because I think there's something genuinely interesting here. The World Cup is a useful illustration of several principles that apply to personal finance as well as global sports economics. The first is the scarcity premium. 500 million requests for 7.1 million tickets is an extreme example of something that operates in every market. When demand dramatically exceeds supply, prices don't just rise. They rise in ways that feel disconnected from the intrinsic value of the thing. Is a seat at a group stage match between two small nations worth $380 intrinsically? Probably not, in any meaningful sense. But is it worth $380 to the specific person who wants to attend? Apparently yes, because they paid it. This is the fundamental lesson about market pricing. Value isn't absolute. It's determined by the intersection of how many people want something and how available that something is. The same dynamic operates in housing markets, in concert tickets, in the job market. Scarcity creates premiums that sometimes feel irrational and are nonetheless real. The second connection is to the idea of leverage. FIFA is essentially running one of the most profitable leverage operations in sports. They own the rights to an asset, the World Cup, that costs a certain amount to produce. They then license access to that asset to broadcasters, sponsors, host governments, and ticket buyers at prices that generate multiples of the production cost. The $655 million prize pool looks large until you compare it to $9 billion in total revenue. The teams playing, the actual product, receive roughly 7% of what the tournament generates. This is not unique to FIFA. It's how most large entertainment platforms work. The creators of value and the owners of distribution rights often receive very different proportions of the total revenue. Understanding this dynamic in sports makes it easier to recognize it in other contexts. The third connection is simpler. Most people watching this tournament will spend money they hadn't specifically planned to spend. Merchandise, betting, bar tabs, streaming subscriptions, travel if they're lucky. The World Cup, like most large shared cultural events, creates permission for spending that wouldn't otherwise occur. The social context makes it feel reasonable. Everyone around you is spending. The occasion is special. The logic of normal financial discipline loosens. I'm not saying don't enjoy it. The tournament happens once every 4 years, and the enjoyment is real. But being conscious of the permission to spend dynamic that events like this create is useful. The corporations who've spent billions on this tournament understand exactly how it works. Okay, the prediction. I said at the beginning I'd tell you who I think wins, so here it is. Let me first tell you where the money is. As of right now, the week the tournament opens, the betting markets and prediction platforms have Spain as the very slight favorite, at odds that imply roughly a 16% chance of winning. France is essentially tied with Spain at the same implied probability. England are third, at around 11%. Brazil and Argentina sit close together at around 8 to 9% each. Germany is next at around 7%. What's notable about these numbers is that even the favorite, Spain, has only a 16% chance of winning, according to the market. The World Cup is notoriously unkind to favorites. Only 8 different nations have ever won it in its entire history. Upsets are not exceptions, they're structural features of the format. My read. Spain are the right favorite. Lamine Yamal, at 17, is arguably the most gifted player in the world right now. Their squad depth is exceptional, and their system is well established. But I don't think Spain wins this. I think France wins it. Here's why. France's squad, even with the Saliba injury concern, is the most individually talented in the tournament. Mbappe, Dembele, Tchouaméni. They've reached 2 of the last 4 finals and won 1. The experience at this level is deep and real. Spain play a beautiful system. France play individuals who are collectively devastating. Those are different types of dangerous. If everything runs reasonably, no major additional injuries, Mbappe fit and motivated, France lift the trophy on July 19th at MetLife. That's my call. I've been wrong before. The more interesting question, from this channel's perspective, is this. FIFA earns $9 billion from this tournament. The champion earns $50 million. The players who actually make it worth watching, Mbappe, Yamal, Pedri, Vinicius, earn their club wages plus whatever their national federation pays them. Their clubs receive compensation through FIFA's Club Benefit Program. The entity that captures the most value from this tournament is not the teams who win it. It's the organization that owns the rights to it. That's a useful thing to understand about how value flows in large commercial events. And it's a principle that extends well beyond football. The World Cup starts in 3 days. 104 matches across 16 cities, 48 teams, 5.5 million people in stadiums, somewhere between 5 and 6 billion engaged globally, $9 billion flowing through FIFA's accounts, $655 million in prize money, $727 million total, distributed to the teams who play, $50 million for whoever lifts the trophy in New Jersey on July 19th. A $60 ticket that became a $4,000 ticket through dynamic pricing, and a dynamic pricing ticket that someone listed for $11.5 million on FIFA's own platform. I'll be watching, probably from a couch, not from MetLife Stadium, not at any of the prices I described today, and I'll be thinking, as I always do, about what the money tells you, about demand and scarcity and leverage, and where value actually accumulates in a large system. The football is genuinely exciting. This tournament, with this format and these players and this stage, has the potential to be extraordinary. But the money story is almost as interesting. And now you know both. Who do you think wins the 2026 World Cup? Drop it below. Let's see who gets it right. If this was interesting, stick around.